My name is Darryl Purdy, and I am the cinematics and animation director for Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians of the Galaxy, a big part of the MCU, not just their own movies, but throughout various movies, they're a part of those stories. People have expectations. We saw that with Marvel's Avengers, the 1-to-1 ratio, like, do they look the same? People have expectations. Can you talk about the presence that you wanted to bring with this team into the game? Were you trying to kind of sync it up more with the movies, or did you not worry about that? Were you just like, this is our team and we want to present it our way?
What was great was early on in the process when we were collaborating with Marvel, it was clear that they were keen on Eidos Montreal kind of doing their own unique take on Guardians of the Galaxy, which was great. But, at the beginning, we kind of did a deep dive into pretty much everything Guardians. We looked into, the 50 years of comics. We looked into the MCU. We also looked into the animated series, anything kind of we could grab, to get reference and use that to influence us for our story. But we knew always that we wanted to try to, and Marvel wanted to try to bring a unique new perspective to the Guardians franchise, which, being a comic book kid growing up, I drew comics all my life. I found it very like a privileged position to be in, to kind of add to this 50-year, history of this franchise.
And Groot, obviously, he looks pretty different in terms, obviously he's the character that's the tree, right? Like everybody knows who Groot is, but you have a very distinct look for this character with kind of the holster, and he looks like he might be in his 20s here. He's been scaled up in different versions of the films and comics. Can you talk about just kind of animating him and the challenges that come with that?
Yeah, I guess for any character, when we're looking into it, whether it be for animation or for performance, I kind of approach it similar to if it was an unknown character. You're always trying to kind of, delve into what makes that character who they are and what's their role in your story. And that influences, if you've done your job right, that influences the style of animation. For Groot, for me, he was always the kind of, like the Guardians, when we start with them, they're fairly recently formed, and they're a group of kind of these misfits that Star-Lord has kind of put together as a group, and they're kind of like going out and they're like heroes for hire. And there's a certain amount of tension between them because they've not all worked together for a long period of time. But for me, I always saw Groot is that person who was kind of the bit more of the kind of like wise prophet. No matter what he looks like, age or whatever, he was always the one who kind of is the most optimistic out of all of them, who kind of like sees it as like, hey, it'll all work out in the end. And he's kind of, even though we only hear I am Groot, he always feels like he has a gravitas or something profound that he says. And that kind of influenced him in his motion, where, he's quite slow moving and doesn't rush anything when he needs to, but when he's called to action, he can be kind of a brute on the battlefield. So,
and in a lot of the shots we see, it's very much the ensemble, right? Like it looks like that was a focus of trying to keep most of them in frame for a lot of the shots. Can you go into the team dynamic and also working with the actors? Obviously we don't know who they are yet, but just kind of the direction you would give in terms of particular moments?
Yeah, probably the biggest thing at the beginning of this project that was important was chemistry. We know it's an ensemble cast, so there's inherent complications that come with that, when you're telling a story, as anybody who's done a kind of an ensemble story will tell you. But for me, chemistry was a big thing. And not only chemistry as in on-screen chemistry, but what we were really looking for was chemistry. So me as a cinematics director, I'm looking for not only that the actors that portray these characters have chemistry, like when the cameras are rolling, the virtual cameras, I'll call them, but also off screen, they have chemistry. And not only that, then there's the chemistry between myself, the actors, myself and the animators, but always it was with that idea that we need to, the tone of this project was very important, that we kind of nailed that kind of like, fun but heartfelt thing that the Guardians franchise brings. So with our cast, one of the big things was we tried to have them spend as much time as possible. And we knew a lot of our shoots would have all 5 of them. They would be there all day. Even some of our cast carpooled to the shoots together, so they even got more time together. So at the end of it, the shoot was really, we tried to create an environment in the shoots when we were creating that mirrored what we wanted to see on screen.
So you kind of spoke about, kind of developing that chemistry on and off screen, but I'm curious, like from the perspective of a director, like what are some of the challenges or even separate from challenges, like what's the approach that you take when, not only are you framing the shot with multiple characters in it, but what's the approach to kind of blocking out everyone's different movements in one scene in relation to the camera? Because obviously, you don't want everybody doing all sorts of things that would be distracting. What's the process like of figuring out, okay, this scene, we're going to have Gamora come up towards the camera and do her thing. And in the background, right? Like, is there a lot of those conversations that happen in terms of like mocap?
Yeah. It's a great question. This was really a big challenge, in that, what you want to do is, we know we're telling our story primarily through the leader, Star-Lord's perspective. Okay. But you can't tell this story without also having insight into the other 4 Guardians. Okay. And even though we're using Star-Lord and Peter Quill as the kind of window into that group, every one of those characters also are very important. So when we're blocking out scenes, there's a thing I like to do on the shoot is, ideally we take it from the script, we get it into a storyboard, and we kind of, roughly block out, very similar to a 3D animated feature, as in we kind of have our master shots that we think we're going to want. But I always tell like our group is that I'm a huge believer in happy accidents, or in things that, you have no idea that are going to happen on the day, and you should be open to explore them on the day. So you don't want to overplan your shoot or your shots so that you paint yourself into a corner. So what I like to do is we definitely develop them first in 2D images, and we kind of have an idea, me and the cinematographer, of like, okay, here's how we want to shoot. Roughly our cameras are here, 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 and here, right? We have a rough edit of, okay, there's going to be a close up here or a wide here. Mm-hmm. And then we'll walk the actors through that. But then it takes on another form when you get on the performance floor or on the rehearsal, because what you had in your mind of like, oh, you're going to say this line and then you're going to pick up this thing, that might become really unnatural, when you see it, and you're like, oh, okay. So then you usually adjust the blocking a little bit when you have real people there. And then, the cinematographer and I are there going like, okay, we can adjust to this. This is good. And then you roll. And then ideally you're leaving space there for the actors as well to go on instinct. As in, once they've got comfortable with the the characters, there's this very lovely moment I find in shooting when you understand that everything is starting to click with everybody. So if you've built, for me as a director, I'm just trying to build ideally a scenario where everybody feels safe and confident in what they're doing is right. And so they're free to take a chance. And, I can't talk about some of them right now, maybe later on when we're talking a bit more about it, but there are many moments that happened on the shoot that were kind of like impromptu or improv. Now, that's not to say that could only happen if we started from a very, very strong script. We started from a very strong script that everybody believed in. And then as the people got more confident and the chemistry got better, then people start to feel comfortable to, hey, I'm going to try this. What do you think? And what's great is everybody, trusts everybody else. So I have no problem going to an actor and saying, you know what, that was that was great, but it's not right for this moment. And that's when you can address what you're talking about, Alex, where, okay, guys, this scene is about Gamora. So Star-Lord, Rocket, Groot, everybody, you got to just tone it down a little bit because it's Gamora's time. And everybody, and actors are like, yeah, okay, I get it. You can be comfortable telling them, hey, you're stepping on that person's moment. You have a moment here. Your moment is there. And so you're just trying to, once everybody's comfortable, you have no problems having those conversations. It's wonderful.
Kind of playing off that, how do you ensure that, like, the movements, the silhouettes, all these different parts of these characters that people are very familiar with now are true to those characters? Because Groot and Gamora move extremely different from one another.
Having worn both hats on like, I was an animation director earlier in my career, then I was cinematic director for a while, then I wore double hat on another project, and now I'm doing it again. So I've seen kind of multiple areas of game development from that perspective. And I don't know if this is right or wrong, but for me, when we're talking about animation for gameplay, I have a much different approach than I have for cinematics. In animation, in gameplay animation, what you want to do is, because you have smaller chunks of animation that have to go together to create a larger, let's say, feeling, you are very conscious. You're thinking about much more principles of animation, as in, okay, for Groot, we want to make sure that his silhouette, or he always has this stance or whatever, or Gamora is always going to be a little bit more upright or clean and precise. And you're always trying to find those adjectives that can kind of, like, hopefully create an image in the animator's mind, in the designer's mind, in whoever, so that they understand, yes, okay. And then you hope that, by keeping your eye on it, everybody is filtering their work through the lens. Like, whatever, Gamora is efficient and precise. Okay, well, all her movements should be very methodical, thought out, dynamic, whatever. Groot is, when he's not in combat, he's gentle, relaxed. He doesn't seem like it's, but when he's in combat, it's a contrast. It's like, oh my God, we've unleashed a beast. Okay. From an animation standpoint, you're always trying to filter those kind of overall traits and make sure that you see them in the motion. In cinematics, it's a bit of a different approach for me. It's a much more internal, like really internal, discussion with the actors, where you try to give them the same information, but how they manifest it. Like, I've seen this on other projects, and I made this mistake in the past myself, being trained an animator. If you over try to block an actor or somebody to say, no, like, move, hit this pose, then all they're thinking about is the external, the pose. And they're not thinking about why they're doing the thing they're doing. So what you're hoping for is you're trying to trigger something internally that just naturally their body reflects it. And a lot of times, and again, this mistake I made in the past, if I was so focused on the external, I was missing what was good about it. So I've trained my eye better, I think, in cinematics to go, oh yeah, if I was animating that, or if I had whatever, I might do it this way. But you know what? That pose looks really good because I can feel the emotion of it, So I guess, I hope that answers it. It's kind of two different, subtle, different approaches.
Obviously, with cinematics, you can pick where the focus is, where the viewer is putting their eyes, on which characters and what moment. But on the battlefield, when you have that many characters, did you do anything different with animation in general, just to make moments pop, or camera changes, anything like that? Or is it just, you just got to be looking at the right spot at the right time to see Groot do this or Rocket do that?
I would say it's a mix of both in a way. Like, I mean, with 5 characters on screen plus enemies, I mean, you guys have probably played games that have lots of characters on screen at a time. I mean, and then add visual effects and all that stuff. I mean, there is an inherent amount of organized chaos, I'll say. Our game is kind of that, but what's cool is the strength of the combat is, it is kind of like, Star-Lord has a wild combat style. It's fast paced. he's got the jet boots and the elemental guns, and there's a lot to kind of like manage. So we kind of like double down on the inherent feeling of what a battlefield is. Like if you've seen a movie like, Braveheart back in the day when he did the battle scenes, or Saving Private Ryan, they're chaos, like a real battle is. So we kind of use that to our advantage, I feel, in this game where, yes, you're with 5 people who are fighting multiple enemies. There's a certain amount of chaos. But what we try to do is, one, you try to give each Guardian at least some unique signature things that they do, okay? So that they can be, and then what's cool is when you as the leader, Star-Lord, call on one of your Guardians, they have, like, there's a moment where you slow things down, you call your Guardian in to help you, and you see them execute this move, right? So just by our gameplay mechanic, you're in a way like letting the player or the user focus on, oh, I just called Gamora, and oh, she just did that. Oh, cool. And I see the result. So in that way, you're bringing attention to a specific thing while still the battle rages on around you.